The sun hung low over the rolling plains of Nebraska Territory, casting long shadows across Samuel Thornton's modest farmstead. At 52, Samuel's weathered face told the story of a man who had witnessed both the savagery and beauty of the American frontier. His calloused hands, strong from decades of working the land, now gripped the reins of his chestnut mare as he returned from a day's journey to the nearest trading post. The warm glow of sunset painted the prairie grass in hues of amber and gold, a stark contrast to the darkness that would soon find its way to his doorstep. Samuel dismounted with the practiced ease of a man who had spent more time on horseback than most spend on their feet. He removed his wide-brimmed hat, revealing salt and pepper hair that had once been as dark as coal. The quiet serenity of his homestead offered a peace he had sought for years after serving as a scout during the war between the states. Out here, 30 miles from the growing settlement of Cottonwood Springs, a man could rebuild himself away from the ghosts of his past, or so Samuel had believed. Friends, before I continue this gripping tale, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm curious, what city are you watching from today? Now, let's get back to our story of mystery and justice in the Wild West. As Samuel approached his modest cabin, something caught his eye. A dark shape slumped against the weathered oak of his porch steps. The shape did not move, even as Brutus, his loyal hunting dog, began to bark furiously from inside the cabin. Years of frontier instinct kicked in, and Samuel's hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver holstered at his hip. The failing light made it difficult to discern what or who waited for him. Drawing his weapon, he approached with measured steps, scanning the surrounding area for signs of an ambush. "Who's there?" Samuel called out, his voice carrying across the empty plain. No response came, save for the persistent howl of the prairie wind and Brutus's intensified barking. As he drew closer, the shape took form, a woman, bound and slumped forward. Her head hung low, obscuring her face, but her attire was unmistakable, the black habit of a Catholic nun. Samuel quickened his pace, holstering his weapon as concern replaced caution. The woman was bound tightly with rope, her hands secured behind her back, a dirty cloth gagging her mouth. Samuel knelt beside the woman, his heart hammering in his chest. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" He gently lifted her chin, revealing a face bruised but conscious. Her eyes, wide with fear, met his. She appeared to be in her 30s, with skin pale from lack of sun, typical of those who spent their lives in service within church walls. As he removed the gag, she gasped for air but made no sound afterward. Samuel worked quickly to untie the ropes binding her wrists and ankles. It was then that he noticed the piece of paper pinned to her habit. In the failing light, Samuel squinted at the crude lettering on the note. Written in a jagged, angry hand were the words that would haunt the region for months to come. She baptized the wrong child. A cold chill ran down Samuel's spine despite the warm evening air. He had heard whispers in town about tensions between the settlers and the new Catholic mission established near Cottonwood Springs, but nothing that would explain this level of violence. "Ma'am, who did this to you?" Cramped from being bound for what must have been hours, nearly gave way beneath her. He guided her into his cabin, where Brutus's barking turned to curious whimpers at the sight of the stranger. The one-room dwelling was sparse but clean, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed in the corner. Samuel eased the nun onto one of the chairs before stoking the embers in a fireplace to provide both light and warmth. "I'm Samuel Forden," he said, as he placed a tin cup of water before her. "This is my land you're on. Can you tell me your name, sister?" The woman's hands trembled as she reached for the cup, but still she made no sound. She drank deeply, closing her eyes as if the simple act of swallowing caused her pain. When she opened them again, she made a gesture toward her throat, then shook her head. "You can't speak?" Samuel asked, and the woman nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Night had fallen completely by the time Samuel had attended to the nun's immediate needs. He had provided her with a blanket, more water, and a bowl of stew from the pot that had been simmering throughout the day. The woman ate sparingly, her movements cautious and deliberate, as if conserving energy. Samuel sat across from her, his mind racing with questions. Who would do this to a woman of the cloth? What did the cryptic message mean? And perhaps most pressing, why was she left on his property, of all places? The morning light filtered through the cabin's single window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Samuel had spent the night on a bedroll by the fire, offering the nun his bed. She had slept fitfully, occasionally waking with a start, her eyes scanning the room in panic before remembering where she was. Samuel had dozed intermittently, one hand always near his revolver. Now, as dawn broke, he watched as the nun sat up, her face a mask of composed dignity despite the circumstances. Samuel placed a sheet of paper and a pencil before her. "Sister, I need to know what happened. Can you write?" The woman nodded, taking the pencil with steady hands. Her script was elegant, but testament to her education. "I am Sister Mary Agnes, from St. Catherine's Mission," she wrote. "3 men attacked our mission 2 days ago. They took me when I tried to protect the children." Samuel read her words with growing concern. The note they left, about baptizing the wrong child. What does it mean? Sister Mary Agnes's hand trembled slightly as she wrote again. "We baptized several children from the reservation at the request of their mothers. Some men in town were angered by this." She paused, then added, "One child was the son of Jacob Blackwood's mistress, a Pawnee woman. He became enraged when he discovered this." Samuel's expression darkened at the mention of Blackwood, a wealthy cattle baron known for his ruthlessness and prejudice against the native population. "Blackwood has influence in these parts," Samuel said grimly. "But what he's done is beyond the pale, even for him." Sister Mary Agnes wrote again, her message chilling. "They did not just attack me. Father Thomas tried to intervene. They shot him. The children saw everything." Samuel stood abruptly, pacing the small confines of the cabin. The murder of a priest and the abduction of a nun would not go unanswered by the church. But in the lawless expanse of the territory, justice could be slow in coming. And Blackwood's money bought a lot of silence. Sister Mary Agnes wrote one more line before setting down the pencil. "Why did they bring me to you?" The question hung in the air between them. Samuel turned to look out the window at his land, stretching to the horizon. He had chosen this place for its isolation, for the peace it promised. But perhaps there was another reason he had been drawn here, a reason that now connected him to this silent nun and her plight. "I used to be a lawman, sister," he finally said. "In another life, before the war. Some folks still remember." The realization settled over Samuel like a heavy blanket. This wasn't a random act of cruelty. It was a message. By leaving Sister Mary Agnes on his property with that note, Blackwood wasn't just threatening the mission. He was drawing Samuel into a conflict he had long sought to avoid. "They're testing me," Samuel muttered, more to himself than to Sister Mary Agnes, seeing if the old marshal still has any fight left in him. The nun watched him intently, her eyes reflecting both fear and a flicker of hope. Samuel strapped on his gun belt with practiced efficiency, checking the cylinder of his Colt before holstering it. The weight of the weapon at his hip was familiar, like greeting an old friend, or perhaps more accurately, like facing an old demon. He had hung up his badge years ago, vowing never again to be the instrument of another man's justice. Yet here he was, preparing to ride into a storm of someone else's making. "Sister, I need to go into town. You'll be safe here with Brutus. No one comes out this way without my knowing about it." Sister Mary Agnes's hand shot out, gripping Samuel's wrist with surprising strength. She shook her head vigorously, fear evident in her eyes. "You're worried about the children at the mission," Samuel surmised, and she nodded emphatically. She scribbled hurriedly on the paper. Blackwood threatened to burn the mission if anyone spoke out. The children have no protection now. Samuel understood her concern. If Blackwood had already killed a priest and abducted a nun, there was no telling what else he might do to silence those who opposed him. "I'll need to move carefully then," Samuel said, his mind already formulating a plan. "First, I need information. Who else was involved? Who might stand as witness? I can't go up against Blackwood without knowing the lay of the land." He paused, studying the nun's determined expression. "And I'll need to get word to the mission. Let them know you're safe without tipping our hand." Sister Mary Agnes wrote quickly. "Sister Martha can be trusted. She visits the general store on Thursdays for supplies." Samuel nodded, his decision made. "I'll head to town tomorrow then. For now, we need to prepare in case Blackwood's men come looking." He moved to a loose floorboard beneath his bed, revealing a hidden compartment. From it, he withdrew a wooden box, which he opened to reveal another revolver, ammunition, and a tarnished silver star, the badge he had once worn with pride. Sister Mary Agnes watched silently as Samuel ran his thumb over the star's surface before setting it aside. The town of Cottonwood Springs had grown considerably since Samuel had last visited. What had once been little more than a trading post with a saloon now boasted a proper main street with a dozen businesses, including a hotel, a bank, and the general store that was his destination. Samuel rode in shortly before noon, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. He had left Sister Mary Agnes at the farm with strict instructions to stay inside and keep Brutus close. The dog might not stop a determined man, but his barking would provide warning. Samuel tied his horse outside the general store, adjusting his hat low over his eyes. Inside, the store was cool and dim after the brightness of the midday sun. A bell jingled as he entered, drawing the attention of the proprietor, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose. "Samuel Thornton," the man said, surprise evident in his voice. "Didn't expect to see you in town so soon. Monthly supplies aren't due for another 2 weeks." "Hello, Elijah," Samuel replied, approaching the counter. "Just picking up a few things I ran short on." He kept his voice casual, though his eyes continued to survey the store. A few customers browsed the shelves, including a woman in the simple dress of a frontier settler and another in the habit of a nun. Samuel felt a surge of hope. This must be Sister Martha. He moved through the store, selecting items at random while working his way closer to the nun. Sister Martha was a small woman with a round face and kind eyes that couldn't hide her worry. Samuel positioned himself beside her at a display of fabric bolts. "Sister," he said quietly, "I have news of Sister Mary Agnes." The nun's head snapped up, her eyes widening. Before she could respond, Samuel added, "She's safe at my farm. I found her yesterday." Relief washed over Sister Martha's features, followed quickly by concern as she glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "We feared the worst when she did not return," Sister Martha whispered. "Father Thomas's body was found on the mission steps yesterday morning. The children are terrified. Some of the mothers have taken their little ones and fled back to the reservation." Her voice quavered. "The sheriff came, but he asked few questions. He is in Blackwood's pocket, like so many in this town." Samuel nodded grimly. It was as he had suspected. The law would provide no justice here. "What can you tell me about the children Blackwood was concerned about?" Samuel asked, pretending to examine a bolt of blue cotton. Sister Martha's lips thinned to a tight line. "Little Joseph. His mother, Mourning Dove, works in Blackwood's household. He was furious when he discovered the boy had been baptized. He claimed it was done against his wishes, though Mourning Dove had asked us herself." She paused. "She and Joseph have disappeared. We fear for them." Samuel's jaw tightened at this news. "And the other men involved? Would you recognize them?" Sister Martha nodded. "Two of Blackwood's ranch hands, Reed Wilson and Frank Taylor. They've threatened the mission before." She reached into her habit and withdrew a small piece of paper, pressing it into Samuel's hand. "This is where Mourning Dove has family. If she managed to escape, she might have gone there." Samuel pocketed the note without examining it, aware of the risk Sister Martha was taking by helping him. "Stay vigilant at the mission," Samuel advised, keeping his voice low. "I'll send word when I can." He moved away from Sister Martha, completing his purchases with Elijah before heading back out into the harsh sunlight. His next stop would be the saloon, where loose tongues and free-flowing whiskey often provided information that couldn't be obtained elsewhere. As he untied his horse, Samuel caught sight of a group of riders approaching from the south end of town. Blackwood's men, led by the cattle baron himself. Samuel ducked into the narrow alley between the general store and the adjacent building, watching as Jacob Blackwood dismounted in front of the saloon. The man cut an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard and expensive clothes that set him apart from the dusty cowboys who accompanied him. Samuel recognized Reed Wilson and Frank Taylor among the group, their expressions smug as they followed their employer into the saloon. The sight of Blackwood stirred something in Samuel that he had long kept buried, a righteous anger that had once driven him to pin on a badge and stand against men who believed their wealth placed them above the law. He had seen too many like Blackwood in his years as a lawman, men who wrote their own rules and enforced them with violence. Samuel had walked away from that life after the war, believing himself too broken, too disillusioned to serve justice anymore. Now, fate had drawn him back into the fray. Samuel waited until Blackwood and his men had disappeared into the saloon before emerging from the alley. His original plan to gather information there would have to wait. Confronting Blackwood directly would only endanger Sister Mary Agnes and the mission. Instead, he mounted his horse and headed toward the sheriff's office. He needed to understand exactly how deep the corruption ran in Cottonwood Springs before he could formulate a strategy to protect the nun and bring Blackwood to justice. Sheriff Dawson was a thin man with a perpetual squint, as if constantly looking into the sun. He sat behind his desk, boots propped up on its surface, when Samuel entered. Recognition flickered across his features, followed by wariness. "Marshal Thornton," he said, deliberately using Samuel's former title. "What brings you to my office?" Samuel closed the door behind him, removing his hat, as a gesture of respect he didn't feel. "It's just Thornton now, Sheriff. Has been for some time." Once a lawman, always a lawman, Dawson replied, his eyes never leaving Samuel's face. What can I do for you? Samuel took the seat across from the desk, placing his hat on his knee. I'm here about what happened at St. Catherine's Mission. The priest's murder, the missing nun. Sheriff Dawson's expression remained impassive, but Samuel noticed his hand drift closer to the revolver on his desk. Tragic business, Dawson said finally. I've got men looking into it. Do you? Samuel asked, his voice deceptively mild. Because I heard talk that those men might be the same ones responsible. Dawson's eyes narrowed further. You're overstepping, Thornton. This isn't your jurisdiction anymore. Never was, as I recall. You were a federal marshal, not local law. Samuel leaned forward slightly. Just a concerned citizen now, Sheriff. One who doesn't like to see men of the cloth gunned down and nuns abducted from their missions. Sheriff Dawson removed his boots from the desk and sat up straight, his posture now openly hostile. You'd do well to mind your own business, Thornton. Frontier justice can be messy. Not everything is as black and white as you'd like to believe. The implication was clear. Dawson knew exactly what had happened at the mission and had no intention of pursuing the matter. Sometimes, the sheriff continued, it's best to let sleeping dogs lie. Samuel rose, placing his hat back on his head. Funny thing about dogs, Sheriff. Once they get the scent, they don't much care if you want them to lie down. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. By the way, when you see Blackwood, you might mention that I've taken an interest in recent events, for old time's sake. It was a risky move, potentially putting Sister Mary Agnes in greater danger. But Samuel knew that operating in the shadows would only give Blackwood more power. Better to bring the conflict into the open. The ride back to his farm was tense, Samuel's mind working through what he had learned and what it meant for the path ahead. By the time he arrived, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the prairie. Sister Mary Agnes appeared at the cabin door as he approached, Brutus at her side. The dog had apparently accepted her presence, a good sign of her character. Samuel dismounted, leading his horse to the small stable beside the cabin. We have allies at the mission, Samuel told Sister Mary Agnes once they were inside, and I've learned where Morning Dove might have gone. The nun's face brightened at this news, and she quickly wrote on her paper, Can we help her and Joseph? Samuel sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. It's complicated. Blackwood is in town with his men, and the sheriff is clearly in his pocket. Going after Morning Dove now might lead them straight to her. Sister Mary Agnes frowned, then wrote decisively, We cannot abandon them. Her conviction was clear, her eyes holding a strength that belied her silence and the ordeal she had endured. Samuel couldn't help but admire her resolve. No, he agreed, we can't. But we need to be smart about this. Blackwood is powerful, but he's not invincible. Every man has weaknesses, secrets he'd rather keep hidden. We need to find his. Over the next 3 days, Samuel and Sister Mary Agnes developed a plan. Samuel made discreet inquiries about Blackwood's operations, discovering that the cattle baron was involved in more than ranching. Rumor had it that he was illegally selling weapons to certain tribes, while simultaneously stirring up fears of Indian attacks to justify harsh measures against all native peoples. It was a duplicitous game that kept the region unstable and allowed Blackwood to expand his holdings as fearful settlers abandoned their claims. On the 4th day, a visitor arrived at Samuel's farm, Sister Martha, accompanied by an elderly Pawnee man who introduced himself as Swift Hawk, Mourning Dove's uncle. She and the boy are safe, Swift Hawk assured them, hidden where Blackwood will not find them. His weathered face showed both relief and anger. But they cannot hide forever, and others suffer while Blackwood remains unchecked. Sister Mary Agnes embraced Sister Martha, the two nuns sharing a silent moment of relief and determination. When they separated, Sister Martha produced a small bundle from beneath her cloak. Mourning Dove entrusted this to me before she fled, she explained, unwrapping the cloth to reveal a ledger. She took it from Blackwood's study. She said it contains proof of his dealings, names, dates, amounts, enough to ruin him if it reached the right hands. Samuel examined the ledger, his excitement growing as he recognized what he held. Detailed records of illegal weapons sales, bribes to officials including Sheriff Dawson, and plans to drive native tribes from their treaty-protected lands. It was damning evidence, but only if they could get it to someone with the authority and integrity to act on it. "There's a federal judge in Lincoln," Samuel said, thinking aloud. "Judge Harmon. I worked with him years ago. He's honest, and he has no love for men like Blackwood." Sister Martha nodded eagerly. "The bishop is visiting Lincoln next week. I could take these documents to him, and he could present them to the judge." It was a solid plan, but it left one critical question unanswered. Samuel voiced it. What about the immediate threat? Blackwood won't stop looking for Mourning Dove and Joseph, or for Sister Mary Agnes. And once he realizes the ledger is missing, he'll burn down the whole territory to find it. Swift Hawk spoke up, his voice low but firm. "My people will protect Mourning Dove and the boy. But you are right. Blackwood must be dealt with now, not in weeks when white men's justice might finally move." He looked directly at Samuel. "You were a man of the law once. Are you prepared to stand against him?" The question hung in the air, a challenge and an acknowledgement of what they all knew. This would end in blood. Before Samuel could respond, the sound of approaching horses broke the tension. Through the cabin's small window, they could see a group of riders coming toward the farm. Blackwood and at least 6 of his men. "They've found us," Samuel said grimly, reaching for his gun belt. "Sister Martha, Swift Hawk, take the ledger and go out the back. Get to the mission, then make for Lincoln as planned. Sister Mary Agnes should go with you." Sister Mary Agnes shook her head firmly, picking up the paper to write. "I will not run again." She stood tall, her eyes meeting Samuel's with unwavering resolve. Swift Hawk nodded with respect. "She has the heart of a warrior. We will take the evidence to safety, but the fight is here." Samuel didn't waste time arguing. He checked his revolver, then retrieved the second one from its hiding place. "Sister Martha, go now. We'll hold them here." Samuel stepped onto his porch as Blackwood and his men reined in their horses a safe distance from the cabin. The cattle baron sat tall in his saddle, his expensive black coat and hat a stark contrast to the dusty attire of his hired guns. Among them, Samuel recognized Reed Wilson and Frank Taylor, the men Sister Martha had identified as being involved in the attack on the mission. "Thornton," Blackwood called out, his voice carrying easily across the yard. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Don't recall taking anything of yours, Blackwood," Samuel replied evenly, his hand resting near his holstered Colt. Behind him, Sister Mary Agnes stood in the doorway, her presence visible to the mounted men. Blackwood's eyes narrowed as he spotted her. "The good sister needs to return to her rightful place," he said, his tone falsely pleasant. "There are matters of faith that require her attention. Hand her over, and we can all go about our business." Samuel didn't move. Seems to me the sister is exactly where she needs to be, safe from men who murder priests and terrorize women. Blackwood's face darkened with anger. You're meddling in affairs you don't understand, Thornton. This is about more than a baptism or a mission. This is about the future of this territory. Who shapes it, who profits from it. Step aside now, or face the consequences. I understand more than you think, Samuel responded, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. I understand that you've been selling weapons illegally, bribing officials, and plotting to drive native peoples from their lands. I understand that you killed a priest and abducted a nun to cover your tracks. And I understand that your ledger, the one with all the names and figures, is no longer in your possession. Blackwood's composed facade cracked, genuine alarm flashing across his features before rage replaced it. You're bluffing, he spat, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. Samuel shook his head slowly. The ledger's on its way to federal authorities as we speak. It's over, Blackwood. The only question now is how many more people die before you face justice. For a moment, the tableau held. Blackwood and his men on horseback, Samuel on the porch, with Sister Mary Agnes behind him. Then Blackwood's hand moved toward his gun. Kill them both, he ordered his men. Burn everything to the ground. Samuel drew and fired in one fluid motion, years of practice overcoming the rust of disuse. His first shot caught Blackwood in the shoulder, spinning the man in his saddle. His second found Reed Wilson's chest as the hired gun raised his rifle. Chaos erupted as gunfire tore through the evening air. Samuel ducked behind a porch post, pushing Sister Mary Agnes back into the relative safety of the cabin. Frank Taylor and two other men had dismounted and were using their horses as cover while advancing on the cabin. Samuel fired carefully, making each shot count. One of Blackwood's unnamed men fell, clutching his leg. Another bullet splintered the wood inches from Samuel's head. Inside the cabin, Sister Mary Agnes had retrieved the second revolver Samuel had left on the table. Though her hands trembled, she moved to the window, ready to defend herself if the men breached the cabin. Outside, Samuel saw Blackwood struggling to control his horse with one arm while drawing a second pistol with his good hand. The cattle baron's face was a mask of hatred as he fired wildly toward the porch. A bullet grazed Samuel's arm, tearing through his shirt sleeve and leaving a burning trail across his skin. He grunted in pain but kept his focus, taking careful aim at Frank Taylor as the man attempted to circle around to the side of the cabin. Samuel's shot caught him in the chest, dropping him instantly. The remaining men hesitated, clearly reconsidering the wisdom of their employer's orders. Blackwood, seeing his advantage slipping away, roared in frustration. Cowards! There's only one of him. He spurred his horse forward, charging directly toward the cabin with his pistol raised. It was a desperate, reckless move, and it sealed his fate. Samuel stood his ground on the porch, taking deliberate aim as Blackwood bore down on him. 3 shots rang out in quick succession. 2 found their mark in Blackwood's chest, the third in his throat. The cattle baron toppled from his saddle, landing heavily in the dirt of Samuel's yard. His remaining men froze, watching as their employer's blood soaked into the prairie soil. Samuel kept his revolver trained on them, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. It's over. Ride away now, and you might live to see tomorrow. Stay, and you'll join him. The men exchanged glances, then slowly backed their horses away, before turning and galloping off toward town. Samuel waited until the riders were out of sight before lowering his gun. His arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed him, but the wound was minor. He turned to find Sister Mary Agnes standing in the doorway, the revolver still in her hands, but pointed at the ground. Her face was pale, but composed, her eyes fixed on Blackwood's motionless form. Samuel gently took the gun from her hands. "It's done," he said softly. "You're safe now." In the days that followed, word spread quickly of Blackwood's death and the exposure of his illegal activities. Judge Harmon, true to Samuel's assessment, acted swiftly on the evidence provided by the ledger. Sheriff Dawson and several other officials implicated in Blackwood's schemes were arrested. Mourning Dove and Joseph returned from hiding, along with other families who had fled Blackwood's threats. The mission began to rebuild, with Father Thomas laid to rest in a ceremony attended by settlers and Pawnee alike. Sister Mary Agnes remained at St. Catherine's, though she never regained her voice. The trauma of her ordeal had silenced her permanently, doctors said. Yet in her silence, she found a new purpose, working primarily with orphan children who had experienced their own traumas. Her gentle patience and unwavering strength spoke volumes without words. Samuel visited the mission often, helping with repairs and offering protection when needed. One autumn evening, as the first chill of winter crept across the Nebraska plains, Samuel sat on the mission's newly built porch with Sister Mary Agnes. They watched as children played in the yard, their laughter a healing sound after so much violence. "I thought I was done with being a lawman," Samuel said quietly. "Thought I could just hide out there on my farm and let the world pass me by." Sister Mary Agnes slipped her hand into his, a gesture of understanding. "But some fights find you whether you're looking for them or not," he continued, his eyes on the horizon, where the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. "Some injustices can't be ignored, even by a man who's tried to leave that life behind." Sister Mary Agnes nodded, squeezing his hand gently. Though she couldn't speak, her message was clear. Sometimes silence held more power than words, and justice spoke for itself in the end. The frontier continued to change around them, as it always would. Railroads pushed farther west, new settlers arrived, and old conflicts transformed into new ones. But in that corner of Nebraska territory, a measure of peace had been won. Not by the law as written in distant courthouses, but by the courage of those who stood against tyranny when it appeared on their doorstep. And if anyone asked about the silent nun who taught at St. Catherine's mission, they would hear the story of how she had baptized the wrong child, and in doing so, set in motion events that brought down a corrupt empire and gave voice to justice in a lawless land. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.